regular scheduled meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals for Groveland Township. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you all. Danielle, tonight's roll call, please.
Jeff Penzine,
Here.
Mike Donlin,
Here.
Judy Schulte,
Here.
Gina Mosarelli,
Here.
Chris Jonassy.
Here.
All right, let's begin with review of tonight's agenda, which was in our packet for the meeting. Everyone hopefully had a chance to review that. Any questions or additions, modifications? No, if
I
not.
have a question, John,
Yes.
and I don't mean to be a pain, but, given the fact that, you know, in my 3 years that I've been on the BZA, probably 90% of the variance requests that have come before this board are in this very ordinance. I have a hard time, discussing and moving forward with making a decision on either one of these items on the agenda without, one, further direction from the planning commission, or a report from our planning consultant, because with that many coming before the board, I'm leery. I don't want to be in a position to say yay or nay to taking that ability away. We have two things on the agenda tonight, both of them the same ordinance, both of them the same decisions. And both of them, quite honestly, if we opened up the public meeting on the one and talked about the old business on the other, I would be in favor of tabling it just as, you know, until we hear back from either the planning consultant or planning commission on more direction on this, because this is a struggle that we've had with this ordinance. And so the question I have right now, being that both of them are on the agenda, we're both dealing with the same ordinance, you know, do we even have, I don't know if this board, if this is a time to say, you know, to approve the agenda or not to approve the agenda. You know, I would just go right off the bat and say that, you know, the agenda I would table until we get that direction.
So, and I'm of the same mind, Mike, it's the same thing. When I review these, it's unfortunate we can't have the planning commission review this ordinance, because it is true, we get them all. But the bad part is, these applicants don't wanna sit around for 2 or 4 or 6 months or next spring
I get it.
to build their house. They wanna do it now, so it puts us between a rock and a hard spot.
Yep.
But theoretically, our ordinance should be addressed before these are considered.
So tonight we can approve the agenda still. You can approve the minutes. We, instead of we already had a public hearing for the cooks. We can, you guys do whatever you decide, table or whatever. The public hearing has already been set up and posted, so we should still have the public hearing, at least it can be discussed.
Okay.
Because the public was invited to come tonight to voice their concerns. If we do it again, it's another publication, it's more money. So if we can just at least do that, and then if that needs to be tabled at that time, we can table it at that time.
And it is my understanding that the next planning commission meeting, this is up for review
Yes.
and discussion, this specific ordinance.
Yes.
Because you're right, that's 101, that was one of the first of the 3, you know, certifications for, you know, through the MTA. They say, if you keep getting the same thing again and again and again, you need to review your ordinance. There's a problem with the ordinance, it's not, you know, that's what's happening. Yes, sir.
Just to let you know, this was reviewed in quite lengthy detail 2 years ago.
How many?
Maybe 4.
4, okay, I'm sorry, 4 years ago. For the very issue you're talking about.
The accessory building?
But we've had 6 of them since then,
But we've had, yeah.
just this.
Well, is this public, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
We
we-
can-
We're still
we
on
can
the
wait it.
agenda.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, yeah.
When it's appropriate, I like to give some history, but I don't think now's the time.
Well, I'll make the motion then to approve the agenda, which is where we're at.
And I'll second the motion, given the fact that we have, public notices went out and all that, so we'll continue on with that, and we'll have individual discussions and make the decisions on the individual basis versus the agenda.
Okay, then I'll take a vote on the motion to approve tonight's agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, there being none, then tonight's agenda, October 5, 2023 is approved. Referring to that agenda, the next item would be approval of the minutes from our last scheduled meeting on September 12th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I have,
Support that.
I have some corrections.
You have some corrections?
Yes, in the minutes, it says 1,400 square feet for the pole barn, it was actually 1,500 square feet was the variance request. And it said 955 Hollyview instead of 995 Hollyview. And Penzine was spelled wrong once, I corrected it.
That's a month later.
You're welcome.
I amend my motion to accept the minutes as duly noted and amended.
I'll second.
Those in favor? Any opposed? There being none, the minutes for the motion will be approved from September 12th, 2023. And Danielle, just for my clarification, with regard to the minutes, the square footage of the pole barn per the request was not 1,400, it was what?
1,500.
1,500. All right, then on to old business. And to revisit Brother Donovan's comments. I tend to think maybe we as a board might be maybe possibly misinterpreting, and I'm just throwing this out there for thoughtful consideration, but what specifically, because I, as you know, sit on the planning commission, I will be, discussing this with my fellow board members. What specifically are we looking at with regard to ambiguities that need to be reconciled or clarified? And I understand what Mr. Cook's supplemental materials focus on, and that being the square footage. I know what the law said. I did a little research on practical difficulty and hardship and what those terms mean from the viewpoint of the law. But as it relates to the ordinance recently amended, which as I review it, there is no distinction in the language between the former, and just for the record, we'll be clear, it's section 54-616, correct? Danielle? Yes?
There was no change.
There was no change, correct. So the current ordinance is exactly the same as the verbiage utilized in the former ordinance. So what?
Well, I thought we changed it 5 feet. Didn't we change it?
Nope, I changed that back as well.
Oh, okay, that
Yes.
happened Monday?
That was changed,
Okay.
during the whole zoning process, the zoning ordinance process, and it wasn't approved by you guys, by the planning commission to be changed in the first place. I don't know how it got changed.
Okay.
I just
all right.
stumbled upon it.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
And I guess just for clarification, what are we identifying as the problem areas of the existing ordinance with regard to this recurring request? If people are coming before this board,
They're coming
with a
before.
recurring request for a variance relative to detached accessory buildings,
Size and like materials is what the major request is.
and in both of these instances with the applicants tonight, they are REF, 2 to 5 acres, correct? So that would be subsection 3 of 54-616.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are we gonna ask or request the commission to review the entire detached accessory building ordinance or just that subsection?
It's that subsection, but there's also an article that I do believe is included in it as well, which is where it states the 50%
Of the square.
of the square footage.
And I
Of
think
the
the whole
home.
thing should be reviewed, because we have already granted variances for some people to build on less than 2.5. And they've got water in the backyard, so we've already given them one,
But,
where does that put
but
us?
Gina, that's a different section of the ordinance. If it's less than 2 acres, it's a different
Okay,
provision.
okay, but I think all of the accessory building ordinances need to be looked at.
Okay. Maybe this, I don't know, can we just throw this out to Jenny at this point
Yeah.
to speak to the history and what was,
Sure.
Yeah, so, I'm Jenny Sevigny. I was on the BZA and the planning commission when we struggled with the same issue. And just to be clear, I don't know the circumstances of the request for variances. I'm not weighing in on whether you should or you shouldn't do it. I really just wanted to make sure you understood what had transpired. And so we, on the BZA, encountered the same thing. You know, people were coming in, they've got 10-acre parcels, they've built, you know, their house 600 feet back, and they can't go any further back with another accessory building, and so they wanna put it in front, where nobody's ever gonna see it, right? And yet we were requiring them, because at that point, we had no accessory buildings in front of the primary residence, none. And so, you know, in fact, I had to get a variance at my house, because my second garage was 2 feet in front of where my house is. You know, the front of it, you know, so it extended 2 feet beyond the front, so it was that strict, right? So we said, you know, we are granting, at that time, almost every variance request that people had. Because as a board, we looked at it and said, hey, everybody's out here in the country, they want, you know, they have extra land, they have, you know, various snowmobiles and four-wheelers and tractors and second cars, and that's why they're out here in the country, they want these buildings, we wanna accommodate them. And so we took a look at the variance, and our planning consultant at the time said, look, if you, and you were there, Chris, if you're granting, you know, these variances, you need to go look at your ordinance. So we did, and at the time, the clerk was Pam Masick, and the former Danielle was Carrie Allen. We spent months going through, and part of it was the staff had said that prior ordinance was like a differential calculus equation, trying to figure out how much square footage somebody could have. So we said, we need to make this clear so that the residents and the people trying to, you know, support them can understand what they're entitled to under the ordinance as far as square footage. So that was one of the big changes, was to remove all that calculation and just say, if you've got this much property, you know, you get this much square footage. And the thought was to, you know, one, to clear up the language so that it was understandable, but also, we were all kind of stinging a little bit from what had occurred, what we call a blue barn on Branchwell Road. And we said, you know, that was never intended, you know, where you have this large structure in a pretty residential area that dwarfs the existing home that's there. And so we said, you know, we want people to enjoy this community, to live on their property, have the accessory buildings, you know, to store, so it's not all up inside and stuff. So they have those buildings. But we also want to have an appearance within our community that is not an eyesore. So we did say, if you're building in front of the house, you know, you need screening, or you need to have similar materials, so it doesn't look like you've got a blue barn sitting in front of your house, right? So that was the thought, and I'm not saying don't change the ordinance. or, you know, do what you think is appropriate. I'm really just trying to say, here's what we were thinking, here's what we were trying to achieve. And again, then you take it from there as to what you think is appropriate. But, we really wanted to, and if you'll notice, the size of the building is trying to be proportional to the residents, but you can have two buildings, you know? So if you need, let's say, and I'm making it up because I don't even remember the specifics, but let's say you want, 2,000 square feet in a extra building, but you can't because of the way the ordinance was written. You can still have two buildings and get your 2,000 square feet. We were trying to eliminate what looks like some industrial, you know, big, large structure next to a residence. But we do want, the intent was, and where you have to find a balance, we do want people in this community to have, especially when they have larger parcels, the ability to have additional structures on the property to accommodate the needs that they want out here, so.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny.
Oh, one last thing, because I didn't really follow through. So the old ordinances, we wrote and modified this particular one in all sections for all parcel sizes. And then the township went through a rewriting of all ordinances. And I believe it stayed the same. So just so that.
Yeah, the meat of it stayed the same. No,
Yeah,
nothing
yeah,
changed.
So it is the same, all right, yeah.
So, this is difficult for me because, I have a sense of feeling personally how that maybe we were hyper scrutinizing the language when we looked at this issue the first time for Mr. and Mrs. Cook. But I understand there are problematic terms in this ordinance that I think lend themselves to, I don't know, undue gray area. And that specifically attached to use of the term shall and may, right? I did some research, as I understand it, practical difficulty, hardship, that's the essence of the variance from the ordinance, right? If you can satisfy those, whether it's for a use or whether it's for a dimensional accommodation, if you can satisfy that because of practical difficulty or hardship, there's other considerations that are to be taken into account with regard to the variance request. So the language of the ordinance is intended to be kind of firm and strict and black and white. But the job of the board here is to determine if there's a showing of difficulty, practical difficulty or hardship sufficient to warrant our consideration of these other aspects of the request, such that we retain the character of the community, but we're still protecting precedent and the spirit of the ordinance. So, Jenny?
So just, and I'm not sure with the planning consultant that you have now, but the guidance that we had received is that the planning commission will put together what they see as the overall vision for the community through their master plan and through their ordinances. And then you penalize the public if you just keep granting variances. Because basically you're making them pay to do what you think is permissible in the community. And that's why you really, once you put together your vision through your ordinance of what you think that you want for the overall community. And an example is the Dixie Byway, right? We put together what we want for a vision as future development happens on Dixie. And it's the same thing, you have this vision you want for the community, you set your ordinances for that, and then you can't cover every possible situation. So there's gonna be something that slips through the cracks, and that's what a variance is for. But it really should be, this is the way the community is designed to look and to plan for, And then, you know, it's the rare occasion that you're gonna find this slips through the cracks. So and again, I'm not telling you to do it or not do it or not change the variance, I'm just
So
trying
we
to.
also have a blight variance, and maybe what we need to look at is that as well, because if people have these things and we are going to restrict, what they can put them in, and I, you know, I don't want people building buildings 3 times the size of their home. I mean, that's to me an accident waiting to happen down the road. We've already had people growing things in barns that have been a problem, and I don't wanna open it up for that. But I also don't want somebody to get a blight ordinance ticket because we've said, oh, no, you can't. So I think it's a broader picture, like you're saying, the gray area for me is, I think we need to look at a little bit more than what we're looking at even. But once a hardship, in my opinion, once you've proven your hardship, we move on from there. Okay, what do we have to do to, you know, to see if we can make this work?
I think that the hardship in many instances in our whole township is due to the topography of our properties. And I also had said a long time ago, many years, I think the building department, when they are issuing a permit, should explain to people, if you have a 10-acre parcel, don't build it at the back, because down the road this could happen. If you have a 5.5-acre part, a 5-acre, and you might wanna split it into 2.5, don't build in the middle, because you won't be able to do it. You won't be able to put in a deed strip, there's not going to be enough land. A lot of this is our applicants are not knowledgeable with our variances and with our, basically our ordinances, our rules and regulations. So I think more instruction to new homeowners or potential homeowners, because I think most of our properties, for a hardship, you could say it's the topography, and in most instances, it really is. But I think these other additional information given to people would certainly eliminate a lot of problems, not today or next week, but maybe 5 years down the road, or we wanna sell half the property or whatever. And these could be avoided if the building department took more responsibility when people apply for their initial building permit.
You're missing a couple, I think, of basic tenets though. The principal issue on going for a variance is they have to prove a practical difficulty or hardship. And we're very good about telling them, don't go in there and say, I just want it over here, because I'll guarantee you, they won't approve it, they can't. They have to prove the hardship, but the fact that they have a hardship does not mean they get guaranteed that they have it anyway, which is why the board looks at it and then decides to put some other contingencies on it. Now, you talk about the discussions that were had when we all sat in the conference room, we're working on this for quite a while. Part of it was, the basic premise was we got a lot of requests for a building in the front. And maybe we should be a little more liberal on it. So they did. What you have there, I think, is an accurate representation of exactly what all those discussions and efforts were about to get it to where it is now. So it's not that it's wrong. Now, I think what you see can happen is, once they get to that stage, now can we have another stage that makes it even broader? And the whole purpose of the discussion they had for putting light materials on it and not having them too big is because, well, I used to call it Goodyear barn, you know, it was just way out of perspective for 99% of the people. Now, the guy that owns that thinks it's beautiful, okay?
The only one.
And the only one I've heard say yes. So I'm saying, it's not that there's something wrong with that ordinance. It's if you actually feel you wanna start allowing larger buildings, you can ask the planning commission to consider that if that's what you think, but you need to balance that. I can tell you, I have 2 barns on my property, both roughly in the middle of my property in the backyard. And over the years, what inevitably happens out here, I think what mine has been typical of a lot of them. I mean, both of my barns bigger twice. And I still got a slab next to my car barn that I park all my farm implements on. Well, most blight cases you talk about are from people that start stacking stuff up all over the place. If could, I'm just suggesting this, and I'll be happy to be at the PC meeting, but if you start putting big barns in the front yard, you have no way of really being able to control that if that person sells that house. That's part of the problem. You get somebody else that comes in and thinks, I don't wanna do it. And you can just say, well, we can do that with a blight ordinance, but those cost a lot of money. A lot more money than we ever collect from the homeowner, probably in 10 years.
Can I add a couple thoughts just to kind of weigh in on the discussion? I know the agenda has Mr. Cook's item on the board. I'll come to that because one of the questions I have for you is what alternatives have you considered since the last meeting? Because that was a question I asked at the previous meeting. But when it comes down to is that in that alternatives, if there are alternatives on the property that are available to be done that can avoid a situation, then those alternatives should be considered. And that consideration should weigh into the hardship overall for that square footage,
Absolutely right.
that location, and all of that stuff. So, on one hand, you gotta look at those things too, to understand what the hardship is. What I think the ordinance, and this is my opinion, in looking at what we have, we are 50% of our principal buildings, and this is just an opinion I'm throwing out there. We are 50% of our principal buildings. A lot of our buildings in Groveland Township are not mansions. They're small buildings, 14, 15, maybe 2,300 square feet. You might find a few outside the 4,000 or 5,000 square foot range. But when you start to look at 1,400 square feet, or I think we were talking yours, 1,800 square feet, doing 50% of that, you look at that barn, that's just a regular garage, 12 by 23.
Three-car garages.
Three-car garage, right? So, you're looking at that, and, most pole barns, the design of most pole barns are much bigger than that, when you're looking at all that stuff. So, that the 50% portion, I think, is what's triggering a lot of variances coming into this thing, because, you wanna put up a 1,700 square foot pole barn that is matching the size of your house. What I would ask, in the future is maybe consider the fact that go 50% of the allowable accessory building in the rear yard. So in this case, 3,200 square feet, you would be allowed 1,800 square feet. Now, that's just a suggestion.
Bless you.
But alternatives have to be weighed into this thing. The other thing I think that weighs into this thing, and like the Big Blue barn, it was highly visible and very close to neighboring properties. And that's another thing that's this, I don't think we're addressing in this. We can put conditions. You're gonna build a 1,700 square foot barn when it's only 50% of your principal building, but we need you to be set back, 40 feet instead of 20 feet. Or we need to make sure you put landscaping as a buffer between the house. Those are the types of things that, I don't think we have that mechanism in the ordinance to do that, to say that, Jenny.
But you can't have the variance.
We can't.
Can in a variance?
Yeah. Because
You
we
could
did
put-
that with
done
the
that.
parks, remember? We told you guys, build a berm, plant some trees on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but did we ask for a variance on that?
Yes, you did.
Oh, yeah, we did.
Yes,
The brain
you
cell- I
did.
killed that brain cell.
Now ask me if it got done.
Oh, don't even start that myself. Don't even.
Okay. Yeah,
People come
so
in
we do.
sometimes because they'll ask, well, I want to divide my property, but I can't meet your requirements. Can't we move it around somehow? Something. I said, I'm gonna tell you a story. There's a guy about 38 years old that moved out here, and on his property, he built a couple of barns, and he deliberately built one of them about 25 feet from the side yard, and you need 60 feet for an easement. Thought it was a great idea, never gonna split the property. And now, the back half of that 7 acres he lives on is completely empty because it doesn't have horses anymore, right? He'd have loved to have been able to sell that and get 50 to 70 grand for the building site. But he can't because of the decision he made 42 years ago. And you know who that guy was? Me. Okay, so I don't get special dispensation and say, I wanna come back and rewrite the ordinance because I didn't have the forethought to think that when I'm in my 70s, maybe I don't want the back pastures anymore and cleaning up after horses, okay? I'm just saying, that's the kind of thing that happens. And so if you sell property to somebody else, you get the next guy coming in and asking for it. There's a reason they did not, I thought they did a great job on that, because it was much more liberal than what we originally had, which was pretty much cut and dry. You can't put it in front, in the discussion, you need a variance. If you haven't got a topological or hardship case on it, you're not getting anything, right? It was very cut and dry. And it's not like other communities don't do it. My son owns some property on M15 up in Atlas. It's a commercial piece of property, and he thought, you know, if I don't move my business there, maybe I'll just put a big barn up for storing all his cars and motorcycles in, right? And of course, you know, you can't do that. Well, you can have a circus on that piece of property. It was in their zoning order. I don't know when it got written. It must have been 1790 or something. You could have a circus in that zoning district, but you can't have a cold storage building unless you put an office and a septic system and all the rest of the stuff there. Now, I can't imagine how they can keep that process in Atlas. Their planner is pretty, nope, that can't be done. I'm just saying, it is incumbent on the person buying it. And when we bought our property out here, the first thing I did was call out there and say, can I have some horses on my property? And how many can I have? Because we had a horse already, we wanted to get another one. So I knew that before I went there. And the decision to move my car storage barn where it is because I deliberately wanted to stop me from splitting it, which I admit now, I regret.
So Bob, I understand what you're expressing. I think it kind of echoes what Judy was saying. There's an element of due diligence that goes into, you know, purchasing property in a community. But the due diligence attaches to your current objectives, and those may change over time, and you may later in life acquire things that you didn't have before that would open doors within the confines of your property. So I
Or
don't,
to the opposite, and when we buy a piece of property, we could have built a barn, and as time goes on, this ordinance gets put on afterwards.
Well, you bought a piece of property, you couldn't put a barn on one?
Yeah,
When
there
they
was.
first
The ordinance
the
was
front
only
barn.
4 years old, is what she's saying, and they
Yeah.
bought the house prior to the ordinance, so.
Well,
So
you couldn't put the
They
barn
couldn't
on
put
one.
it in, when you put it
Before,
in.
you couldn't put it in front.
Period.
You
It
couldn't,
would've
the
been
previous
able to do
ordinance was
And-
nothing.
And unless it's an actual agricultural operation, we don't allow outbuildings for livestock until the house is there, because we've had people do that, and then all the animals drop dead.
so Gina, did you wanna,
No, go ahead.
no, right?
Well, we haven't heard from Chris though.
Well, I was semi-involved when the ordinance was changed. And before, that's the way it was. There was nothing in front, period. So the 50% going in front, that was all changed while I was part of it. The ones that I'm seeing, that I'm noticing, the two big things are the size, right? And the light materials. Personally, the size, as long as it's within reason, I'm okay with. The light materials, I'm sorry, but I am silent. Me personally, okay? I think that if you're gonna put it in front, and we've been a little bit liberal in terms of what it means to be light materials. If it's a siding, then it needs to look like the same type of siding. It doesn't have to be exactly the same siding if it's vinyl, whatnot. But, you're putting it in front of your building, you're in front of your house, okay? So whether you can see it, from the road or not, one of the first ones we had after this was changed was the same type of thing. It was in front of their house. It couldn't be seen from the road. It was a neighbor of mine, it was so far back you couldn't see it from the road, but we did. We approved the variance because, again, the size, I think it was a size issue, but they couldn't build it behind. We said, okay to the size, but you have to do it in the light materials. But it comes down to what is the vision. The planning commission is the group that sets the vision for the community. What we're here to do, and one of the first things that the old planner specifically told us, our job is to say no. That's what our job is. Now, me personally, I have a hard time with that because again, what we've talked about and some of the things that have been brought up. You know, but these 5 conditions have to be met for us to approve it. And if these conditions aren't met, we're not supposed to be approving it.
When you say 5 conditions, Chris, what are you referring to specifically?
It's the,
Yeah. They don't,
consider that if the
They don't
following
all
list of
have to be
guidelines are
done.
applicable. Right? Those, and that's why this was put into the application back then, was because this is what we are supposed to go by.
right.
Not our personal feelings, not our, you know, what we believe, these are the regulations, the guidelines.
Well,
And that's why the first thing we have to determine is there a hardship that meets this?
so, go ahead.
No, I just wanna ask Mr. and Mrs. Cook,
Yeah.
you know, the question on the alternatives, you know, cause I brought up, you know, the last meeting, I asked, about the different alternatives, you know, where your existing pole barn is, expanding your existing pole barn, coming, you know, building in that area there. Have you considered any alternatives in that regards, to the side of the house, so that you're not in the front yard, to obtain the same square footage that you're really looking for in combination with 2 structures? Maybe you just have one larger structure, that side, the side of the house, and things along that lines?
We've had other carpenters out there and looking at that. I've had friends that do have their contractor's license, and I've had them out there looking at it. And it's a major renovation to kind of change around the whole garage structure, then take out pavement that's in the current parking area, and then try to have it fit into a garage, and then have that, or the pole barn, and then have that pole barn, kind of the whole pitch and the roof and everything else taken out to the other way. So nothing's aligned, and then nothing's gonna be able to really be parked in there in that direction, or the whole back is gonna be kind of useless. I've looked at that also with even the one side yard and expanding over there, both the topography that's there and also with the septic
Yeah,
field.
And I'm not so concerned about the side, you know, I think the hardship was proven with the pond in the back, the septic field, the, you know, getting to that side yard lot, the topography over there. The alternative is, what I was looking for is the alternatives for that area. And I know you talked to carpenters and stuff like that, but you could get the square footage you need to that side, expanding or moving things around or doing things, adjusting pavements and things like that as well, could you not?
With major expansion and tearing out the whole asphalt and redoing that area completely, and house renovations, yes. If we're looking at $100,000 budget, $200,000 budget, tearing out, making those major renovations, and to me, that doesn't seem fair to the intent, especially when I look at existing approvals of variances just even recently in the past several months. That, you know, it's topography, so I looked at it, but to change that, to change the whole driveway going into the front of my garage, coming from the side in that area,
Sure.
to changing the whole look of the house, potentially varying
That's an
other
addition,
areas,
that's not an accessory building.
So if I could, I mean, just to kind of keep the discussion on topic for tonight. Mike, I appreciate what you say about kind of tabling all of this until the commission revisits the ordinance, but respectfully, I'm not sure that's necessary, especially in light of what Chris has said and what others have said. I'm not into
Months.
plowing tilled soil, as they say, so, which is not to say we might not end up there, but, why don't we take a stab just on the existing, this request for us tonight is a location, size, and material. And I think there was consensus, we didn't vote, but I think we were in general agreement with regard to location, that a hardship had been proven based upon the physical characteristics of the land, correct?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I had a misunderstanding last time in the rules. I am allowed to put a barn into the front yard. So, I kind of presented it as I need a variance for putting the barn in the front yard. So, the more the hardship is proving that I can't put the size of barn that I want.
Well, I was gonna get to that.
Okay, sorry.
I was gonna get to that.
Sorry.
Okay?
I had a misunderstanding last time, so I just wanna make sure that was.
No, there's
Okay.
3 elements to this request: location, size, and material,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
With regard to location, I don't think we have any dispute regarding the fact that you have to be upfront, which.
But we don't, he's allowed to, so we don't have to, that's not even part of the variance, is the location, because you can put up to 50% in front of the house if you use like materials. So the location isn't part of the variance, because that's in
It's
the
already
ordinance.
allowable.
He's already,
that was my misunderstanding last
right,
time.
and that's, but that's not part of the variance. We don't have to say that his location is okay, that's already part of it. So the variance he's looking for is size and the like materials. Right?
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. So I guess just with regard to size, what do you present as, what is the basis for the practical difficulty or the hardship with regard to size?
Regard to size is that, to store it in there, I could, or if I built it in the backyard, I could build 3,200 square foot. With that, with the topography, I can't build that size there, which I need to do to the front yard. So I need to expand it bigger to provide the size of barn that I'm looking to have my house in zoned REF or rural farm area to put that size of barn. So that's the main difficulty is the topography, putting in the size I want in the other areas that aren't the front yard. And I'm only allowed 1 barn in the front yard for the rest of my life, says the ordinance. So I'm not going in and building it now and then hoping that I can get a variant or build a separate pole barn on my front yard way on the side over there in some other area. I have 1 opportunity to build a barn in the front yard. So that's what I'm looking at for size for current storage space that I want and need to have being in a rural community.
But see, the difficulty with that is the hardship or difficulty attaches to characteristics of the land, not to a desire for a bigger barn so you can store more stuff, if I'm saying that correctly, right? There has to be a reason for it that's tied to a prohibition on the parcel that requires you to deviate from the ordinance. And
Yeah.
what you're suggesting is you just want a bigger pole barn, you can't put it in the back, so you want the same size in the front. But what's the reason for that? It's personal desire?
I mean, it's
Because that's a self-generated, that's a hardship generated by you, the applicant, which in my understanding, that's not a hardship. Am I being correct on that?
So the last, I mean, I can look at the last couple of variances, what I do, that got approved, and I don't see, I mean, I have topography that I can't build the size of barn that I want, being the hardship. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here for a variance in the first place. I looked at just 2 out of the last 4 variances that were approved. And those variances were approved, let's just talk about size right now. They were approved on size, with the main driver being topography, building the size that they want in those areas. And I have no idea why I'm any different than those last 2 that were approved. Furthermore from that, one of them was just approved. One, it wasn't even REF. It was under 2 acres, and it said shall not build a pole barn whatsoever in the front yard. That one was approved, and it was approved for much larger. The allowable space is 0. That one was approved for 1,600, and topography was the reason. Looking at that topography, to be honest, I don't even know why they couldn't have built it in their side yard, because really topography was the trees. They had a wooded area in their side yard. So they got approved for that. They got approved for being, it's gotta be 20 foot from the road. And it's right there, right in the front, very visible, right there in front of everybody. And other variances just before that too, they went in just for size, and I listed them in the presentation here, but their whole concern as well was topography. I wanna build a pole barn in that certain area. And also looking at the meeting minutes, I have to say I'm a little kind of disappointed in the fact that I'm kind of going in. I'm not doing any kind of operation in this barn. I'm storing stuff that's in the barn. It's not a business. It's not a grow operation. It's none of that other stuff. It's storage for my stuff, but to me, as an American, why do I have to prove what I'm putting in there? I gotta buy 10 cars and put them out in my front yard to be able to allow to put this in? I didn't see any of those other questions or the meeting minutes asking those things. I don't know why this keeps coming up about, what am I putting in there? Why do I have to build that big? Kind of seems like I'm being singled out. Not only that, shall was used in every one of those things, and they were granted that. So, why can they use, I mean, what's different? I think my case is actually way better than their cases. I have an area that's more hidden, further away from the road than they are, up on a hill, with existing full trees in front of them.
And Mr. Cook, those are the considerations that, the esoteric considerations, if you will, that we weigh in determining whether the request, you know,
Sure.
does it satisfy the spirit of the ordinance while at the same time retaining the community characteristics of it. So what you're hitting on is, that's why I struggle with precedent in these cases, because every request is different, every parcel is different, every proposal or proposed detached accessory building has different dimensions in relationship to the main building or the principal building. So they're all different, but it's a gradient of acceptability that we have to weigh in determining whether your request tips the scales in favor of approval or does it go too far, right? But I think the ordinance allows us to make that decision. But personally, I just struggle with, I don't know. I guess with regard to the light material, can you speak to that? Because I know that's another element of your request. It's not, we touched on it before. I think the size component kind of dominated the discussion, but what about light material? Because that's also, you know, a requirement in the ordinance.
Yeah, so looking through there, I just kind of looked at the neighborhood and just in my area being also on a private drive. With that being on a private drive and looking at houses on my private drive, also right next to the private drive in that area, it's keeping with the intent. Is looking on there, I found 10, 12 examples of pole barns, some of them in the front yard, some in the behind, granted they're grandfathered in, but the whole intent of the law, at least sitting through a couple hours in the last meeting the way I understood it, was that you're trying not to create a huge eyesore. You're trying to keep the intent of Groveland being a rural community, a farm type community, and keeping similar to the area it is and not building monstrosities that are polka dotted, blue, whatever it may be. And what I did is I found all those areas, now the ones that aren't maybe say in front of the yard, but you're still visible from the road and are not like materials. The ones that are in front of the road are still not like materials. And really it's just color, stuff like that. Yeah, that's fine, that's no problem. But just trying to put vinyl siding on a rural pole barn, I mean, to me, that just doesn't logically make sense. And the pole barn location that I'm looking at building is closer to my existing pole barn than it is my house. And driving into the driveway, you will see that pole barn that's right there, and it is technically behind the house, so I could have painted it blue polka dot, you know? I'm keeping it similar in materials, and it's gonna look odd to put vinyl siding or something like that, or brick in this case, because my house, on the front of my house is brick and then vinyl siding. So I'm trying to keep it where it looks better as you're driving in, to be closer to the existing pole barn.
What materials are you planning to use?
Similar to that of the existing pole barn, being a metal siding in the brown color that would match the similarity of the house, and shingles, which my current house is shingles. So trying to do that, and actually I would put a window on the front of the pole barn, which it's not going to be the plastic see-through, and it's actually gonna be a window. So I'm trying to keep it looking similar to the whole area, especially when you pull in the driveway. That's gonna be on the left. My pole barn is at the very dead end of my driveway, and my house is to the right. So it's trying to keep it similar to that area there and not have to put vinyl or brick on a pole barn. I'm gonna keep it typical of the metal standard, very similar to the existing one, was my intent. And not only that, with it where it's at, honestly, the very front of the pole barn is gonna be very, very hard to be seen. So I kind of included a picture in the packet, but our yard, it goes up a hill to even start going into our driveway. It's up a hill, and in that existing area, there's 4 or 5 full-grown pine trees. There's landscaping with bushes and other decorative flowers and stuff that are already there in front of there. There's a full-grown maple tree that sits there, and that's all gonna be blocking right where I put the front. So to put vinyl siding and brick and just throw away money and have it look odd in that area to me, that's even gonna be hidden from really anybody seeing, let alone that, again, it's on a private drive. So keeping up with the similarities of the existing areas, and trying to build close to that, that's kind of the hardship, if you will, that, you know.
You have a pole barn behind your main, your home.
Well, behind is a big general home. It's not behind my house.
The existing, yeah.
The existing, and it's actually kind of slightly behind, and it's mainly to the side.
Yeah, you
It's
can see it
actually-
from the road, though, it's not easy to see, but you could.
You could see it from the road, but it's not easy to see, yes.
But, and that is, what color, brown?
It's an older.
It's older, but it is brown, and in fact,
Is it also metal siding? Like a tree?
yes, it's metal siding. And I included it in the packet that I gave to everybody, which there's the pole barn and there's the house. So it sits actually to the side. It's not even really, the front of the pole barn is not even behind the back part of the house. Sorry, I don't know. I brought more. Okay.
So the material for the proposed structure would be similar to the dwelling you're talking?
No, it's
Similar to the
pole barn itself.
the existing pole barn itself.
Okay. And you have a shingle, that's a shingle roof on the.
It's a
correct-
shingle roof on the pole barn, it's a shingle roof on my house, and the intent is to stay with a shingle roof.
And what are the dimensions again as proposed?
As proposed, I'm looking at building a 32 by 48, which is roughly 1,500 square feet, which is what was put in the variance. So 32 by 48, the 32 foot would be the, basically the front of the pole barn would be the 32 foot. That would run with the road. That would technically be considered the front of the pole barn is the 32. So it's not even the widest part of the pole barn that would be put facing the road.
And the square footage of the main building is?
Again, it's, to me, it's still a gray area on what you consider square footage, but it's, if I add everything at 16 to 1,800, but if you put in the, actually look at the perimeter of the building as the square footage, then it's going to be, I put it right here for the easy calculations for you. If it's 1,500 square foot, then it'd be 58,100.
I'm just referring to the square footage of the principal or main building.
The square footage of the principal or main building is 2,600 square foot if I look at the perimeter of the building and using that as square footage, because it's not
So
defined.
you're including your sunroom
Yeah,
now?
the
The, well, a garage,
Is it-
sunroom,
yeah,
because it's all part of one, right? So it's a perimeter of the building. And to me, I would argue that that means more the intent, because if I had a 2-story building with a walkout, basement, let's say I'm up to 4,000 square foot or 3,000 square foot, the square footage of the building is way, way less, you know, in comparison.
I believe there's a definition of what principal building is, and I don't think it includes utility areas, if I'm correct.
I tried to look through all of the ordinances and I could not find anything in there when it comes to square footage and the
I
definition.
know years ago we had this conversation, and if I recall correctly, garages did not count
I didn't think it was
as,
2600 or.
so you can't use the garage as part of the
Square footage, yeah.
We may have very well stated that, but I looked, I can't find it either. I can't find that
If you look
wording.
at the definitions for principal building, I saw, I was looking at definitions, I thought I saw it there.
I've never seen anybody include square footage of a garage in the square footage of a house. On a walkout basement, it's usually half the basement house square foot.
The
Usually
last
doesn't
time
cut it.
you didn't even know you count the sunroom.
Oh.
So, yeah, that's why we're clarifying this, because last
It
time
is
he
part of the
didn't know, right, it is.
But if the garage is kind of attached, I mean, that's my opinion.
Even attached, it's not supposed to be.
Yeah, and it's not for square footage selling the house, it's square footage we're talking about building size versus building structure size.
Yeah, it's,
Never been done.
yeah, you can't, the garage is not supposed to be, so what, without the garage, I don't know if I have that.
It's, it's roughly 1,800 square foot.
With the sunroof, that's.
That's what the
Yeah.
sunroom, right.
So is, in percentages, 1536 of the proposed building is what percent of 1,600?
If I did the 1,500 square foot, it's 83%.
83%.
Yeah, and
Now-
again, looking at the overall size, it would be 58%, the perimeter. Which maybe
But that's
that's,
including the garage.
that's
You can't-
including-
You can't go with the 58% because that includes the garage. So you're looking at 83% of your overall.
I didn't see the one, but I'm gonna just kind of agree with you. But to me, I think you would wanna look at when you're approving a variance and how much you're going above, you would wanna kind of look at the overall size of the building itself in comparison to how this structure would look to that structure, is taking it into consideration in a totality of factors for all things involved. But I guess that's my opinion again.
Well, and I think that's for the individual, that's where the individual members of this board have to render their own determination as to whether this variance sufficiently, tips the scales in favor of approval, considering the ordinance.
I do have a.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so my question is, on this back page, the front yard, you say the proposed location would be past the required 50-foot setback from the road as well as 20 feet from the side property line.
Yeah.
And that is the dimensions, that's the 1,500 square foot?
Yes, in fact, I think it's closer to around 100 foot back from the front of the yard.
About that back corner of that, where you have it proposed, the back corner looks like it's closer to the side yard, is that?
The back corner could be closer to the side yard, about 20 foot, so.
Because if we go by the closest point of it. so
The
that-
closest point will be over 20 foot. I've already went out there myself and kind of staked, and then, with plus or minus a foot, but I'm looking at 23 foot roughly to make sure that I'm over 20 foot. But I staked it out there, it will be at least 20 foot from that, side yard. So I don't need any variance on the proximity to the neighboring side yard property.
I did a drive-by of your address. The neighbor to your south has a pretty big detached accessory building. I don't know if it's kind of on the side of the main building or if it's a front structure, but do you know which one I'm talking about? It's
Yes.
green.
Yeah,
Was that there when you folks moved in?
it was there.
It was.
Yeah. So I can say that it's been at least 11 years or
Do
so.
you know the size of that or not?
It's pretty big.
And then behind you, of course, is the horse farm, correct?
Behind and to the side of me, actually on that same south side, in fact, I have one of the biggest bull barns, I think, in the area, which is a huge horse barn that's in front of their house, but it's actually closer to our house than it is theirs.
And to the north of this, I have this, you're gonna be impressed tonight. Are you Miss Harrison? Debbie Harrison?
No,
No?
she is not here.
No, she's not there.
So, what is your name now?
Judy Flynn.
Judy, are you here with regard to the Crook application?
I was here at the last meeting,
I know.
and I'm just here interested in the atmosphere and the way our community is developing. That's my big interest.
And you understand the purpose of a variance.
Oh, yes. I do.
These are difficult decisions. Anyone else have questions? No?
Oh, I just have a comment to make, but if there's other questions, I can do it. So, and again, I just wanna kind of reiterate how I view the role of the NCA
Please do.
and the planning commission. And so, I've lived in this community for over 50 years, and it's changed a lot. I used to ride my bike up and down 15 and have these dreams. But that's part of what the planning commission does, is it looks at the future and it says, what is our vision, and how can we make that happen? So there's a lot of things as you drive around the community, you're going to see that aren't necessarily the vision you have for the future, because we've got things that are 30 and 40 and 50 years old. So you can't always just go by what you see around the community and say, well, okay, you have to look at what is the vision, and that vision is trying to be set through the ordinance by the planning commission. And so you're going to evolve your ordinances through the life of this community. So the fact that there's an ordinance right now on accessory buildings doesn't mean it's in stone and can't be changed. I don't mean it that way, but it is the vision that was set, and your job is to try to embrace that vision as people come in and say, well, I want to do it a little different. And so we did, try to look at the community and say, it is reasonable to put it in front of your house. But the vision we have as we go forward, because this community continues to grow. I mean, when 50 years ago to now, there's a lot more, building and residents, and parcels are smaller than, used to have 20, 30 acres, and everybody had, now we go. So you need to, as a BZA, really embrace the vision that's been set by the planning commission. And again, there's gonna be some situations that do, justify a variance. And you do look at the hardship. And so I would just question you, is having something larger a hardship? Is having something that aesthetically looks a certain way but costs more a true hardship? And so you really need to look at embracing the vision that was set, and then really assessing what is the true hardship versus people have individual wants and desires and preferences. So I'll leave it at that.
Do you know where the number for what we're allowed in the back came from? Do you know where that came from? How did they determine that?
I'd have to go back and see if old brain cells could remember.
Some of it was tied to trying to figure out how much usable space there was and not having the building over exceed the footprint of everything on the
There's
property.
a lot.
So as they got bigger, the buildings got
Well,
bigger.
I'm asking that too, because some of the ones that have come before us that we have granted were because if you buy a pole barn kit, it's this size,
Yeah.
it's this size,
Well,
so
And
how
we
do you?
looked at kits. When
Okay.
we did the ordinance, we looked at the size of different kits
Okay.
and said, well, and what was listed as some of the uses for that square footage. So if you bought a 50-foot long pole barn, it was a more commercial use and blah, blah, blah. So we tried to, as we looked at the sizes, try to say, is it more commercial, is this more residential, and we tried to not go back on what the ordinance had as far as size-wise. It was really, we did look at overall lot, you can't overbuild on the parcel, but we looked at all of them. I just don't remember if we changed it. We tried not to go backwards in size, but to allow the front and, but again, within the limits of the size, so.
Thanks, Jenny. Any other questions for Mr. and Mrs. Cook? So Danielle, at this point, I don't know if we take a vote or.
We have to have a motion to take a
Oh,
vote on.
okay, thank you. I guess revisiting Mike's suggestion with regard to tabling, any thoughts on that?
Well, that would have to come from the applicant. I think that, you know,
And that would just be in light of the conditions.
so I, you know, the thing I'm struggling with, and I'll be honest, is the alternatives. Financial hardship is not considered a hardship in the ordinance, so I'm having a hard time with the alternatives. And if I were to do a motion right now, I'll be honest, and, to your dismay, I would make a motion to deny the, variance for the, size of the building that they're having in the front yard, as well as the, variance that they're requesting for the light materials too. I'm just putting it out there, I'm just putting it out there in general, not making the motion, but I am struggling with the alternatives in this particular case. So I'm just gonna leave that for the board to kind of maybe expound upon, and then if someone would like to make a motion, or I could make a motion to that effect, but that's kind of where I'm heading with that.
So I do wanna say, I was struggling with the 83%. I think that is, you know, more than the intent of the ordinance. However, when you said, okay, what if we even took half of what was allowable, if you could put it in the back, because he's proven that specific hardship. But I'm looking at this paper that I copied, and, I'm seeing fulfillment on several of them, but the one that is really is number 3. This variance would be the minimum variance that would make possible the reasonable use of land, because where he has to put it, he has to put it. There's no question about that either. And it is necessary for the preservation of a substantial property right. And I don't think I even need to read any more after saying that. So I still struggle with the 83%, but if we can look at, if the ordinance were to get tweaked, I like the idea that you suggested about maybe in the front, that 50% becomes 50% of what we allow in the back. But yes, we still need light materials, he's got the buffers, he's got those things. But I am not, I'm not like-minded in the denial. I think that, I think we can work with square footage.
And I would say that 50% of the 3,200 square foot is less than what I'm asking for from that standpoint. That's 1,600
It's more than,
square.
no, that's what I'm saying, it's
We are
more,
less.
oh yeah,
Say
you are
that's
asking
more.
for less. I
I'm
know,
only
but I
asking-
can't go by that.
Understood.
That's a thought, that's something that I think the planning commission needs to entertain that, because there are, and I've looked around too, and there are a lot of older, smaller homes. And we are outside all the time living out here. And we need places to put our stuff. And I'm not gonna tell you, you can't buy your stuff. But I have a neighbor who has a bunch of in his front yard, and it needs to be covered, you know who I'm talking about. And it's been an ongoing issue trying to get him to do it. I don't know where the heck he put the thing, but regardless, I don't want that either, and that's where my struggle is. We have like ordinances, and I feel like he's trying to do the right thing, and you're, yeah, okay, I'm not gonna say it.
And I don't know
That's what I mean.
necessarily that tearing up an asphalt driveway and renovating your house, that's past financial hardships to
Well,
me,
that's
in
an
my
addition,
opinion.
that's not an accessory
No,
building.
no, no, but I mean, that's what he's saying, that
Right.
the reason why he's saying no is because I'm not looking at that, and we can't use
Well,
financial hardship, so.
Technically, that is not one of the things that we go by.
Okay.
That's, financial hardship is not.
Yeah.
No, no, I know it's not
No, no, no,
financial,
no, no,
I'm saying,
not that.
it's past the financial hardship that he mentioned, but tearing out asphalt of an existing driveway, renovating the front part of your house to put into a driveway in another area, changing the front driveway to come into there.
And I understand what
You
you're
know
saying.
what I'm saying? That's-
I
that's
understand,
beyond.
But that's still would be considered financial, and we're not allowed to.
Mhm.
I understand what you're saying, I mean, I personally,
Yeah.
I get it, but by the rules of the BZA and the laws of the BZA, that would be considered financial, and we cannot consider.
Yeah, and it's.
And I do understand what you're saying, but that's,
And then it's the topography is the main hardship point, and then, like I said, I mean, just looking at, all the past two that I put on here, as far as the last variances were approved, to me, this is very, very similar, and in fact, my case is, I think, even more desirable situation for the area than the past ones were. By far more desirable, less, further away from the road, more hidden, less number from zero, it's zoned rural farm, so.
Jeff, if I may ask Judy,
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious of what the rest of the board feels in this. I'm prepared to make a motion, but I wanted to kind of engage
Okay,
with you.
and I would be prepared to not go along with your motion because I'm of the mind he's stuck between a rock and a hard spot. We've already told him we're gonna work on changing our ordinances. If you follow the consistency of the
You
approvals
don't
that we.
change ordinances, you make
Mm.
recommendations,
Right.
the township board decides what
Okay,
they're
but
gonna do.
until
We're working on
those
it.
things are addressed, for him to be penalized, when, like you said, you can go through and see where they've been approved and approved and approved and approved. It makes our board look inconsistent. And I understand that if we do this, there's a time lapse, because this doesn't happen overnight. And again, do we ask the applicant, sit back on that till next spring? And I know we're not supposed to be about fairness, we're supposed to be about what there is. But to me, this appears to be too inconsistent to not make an exception, because what he's asking for truly is a practical hardship. I really believe that. And if you were maybe on Grange Hall Road, right where we are now, you would want it in the front yard if this was the residence. But under his unique circumstances, I do think he qualifies for this under our present circumstances. Maybe if you came back next year at this time and we had new ordinance or revisions in place, we'd say, no, you can't do that.
Mhm.
Because we can back it up. Right now, we can't back this up. And I think we have a responsibility to our residents to do that. And I don't.
Variances are all individual.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. No, and I understand that.
Well, but I mean, I don't know these other ones, I wasn't even here for them, looked at them or anything, and I've not even looked at theirs because I don't.
I think
know
I'm
where it is.
talking more about,
But I'm telling you, variances are individual.
but
When
the
one doesn't mean you
application
have to
of
do
the
another.
variance.
Pardon?
The application of the variance.
They're all individual.
That's right, they are.
And doing one does not mean another one gets done.
No, but that's part of my argument. They're all individual. And they have to be addressed individually.
Okay.
Well, frankly, what I'm struggling with is the 83%.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no.
Apologies.
And to Mr. Donald's point, the absence of an alternative or consideration of a lesser size is problematic to me. That being said, I've been down the private drive, I've seen the other structures in your neighborhood, I know this is a public notice, none of your immediate adjacent property owners, other than, what was her name? I forget her name. And what was her objection or her concern?
She had no objection.
She didn't
That
have one.
in
She
there.
was just
didn't
wondering-
understand it.
She didn't understand it. She was just wondering what above the square footage meant, the certain amount above the square footage. She didn't have a problem with it. She just wanted to know the meaning of the variance.
And I will say from from alternative size, when I did the calculations and looked at the square footage, I did look at 1,500 and 1,400 square foot. I could change it to 1,400 square foot, and that's within the realm of still being big enough for the storage area. So I would be willing to secede to a 1,400 square foot pole barn instead of the 1,500 for that. Because I did look at it, and it is in my calculations, and it shows you what square footage percentage the 1,400 square foot is. So,
14 divided by 17.
So now,
so it would be under 80%. It would be 78%. Again, looking at the perimeter, which I know you don't look at, but that would be 54% of the perimeter of my building.
And the other precedent examples were what percentage, just on size?
It's hard to divide by zero because they were allowed 0 square footage in their front yard, and they were allowed to get, I think 900 square foot or something for their pole barn.
That was also smaller than what we requested, if I recall correctly. We have done this, approved it with a smaller size than what was requested.
So I mean, realistically, I could go down to the 1,400 square foot. To me, that would still be within the intent of, I'm going down the size that I want. That's still well below the 50% of the state square footage allowed in the backyard. And I did put those in the calculations because that was a consideration. To me, kind of the, let's say 900 square foot barn like we talked about, that's not, I mean, what am I doing? 900 square foot in a rural farm area with acreage. So to me, I looked at 1,400. I would be willing to accept 1,400.
Well, I think that the character and the configuration, the layout of your property is such that it's, you know, this isn't the big blue building it's not, I don't think it's, in the end, I don't think it's far enough afield personally to oppose. I think this is what a variance is intended to do, is to take a select case, weigh the considerations, look at what the ordinance requires, consider the interests of the immediately adjacent property owners in the community, and it's not an easy decision, but if we want to take a motion at this point, I think we've got to.
I'd be interested to see what Chris has to say.
The size was the one that I'm probably struggling the most with.
I do have the record from the last meeting if you guys want to know.
The record.
The square footage and what was on record for the last meeting that you guys approved.
I thought it was 1,700.
we, well,
880.
we gave, 285 additional.
The total square footage was 880 square feet in an R1, which doesn't allow accessory building in the front yard.
And then the other one on Dixie, we allowed an extra 285.
Yeah.
But again, that also was part of, he got a kit that was like material, so, yeah.
Thank you. Chris?
Probably one of the hardest ones I sat through.
I agree.
And I understand what you said with the precedents and looked at the other ones that we did, and, you know, I can tell you that each one is separate, each one is different.
Understood.
And that those, you know, you bring up the one that we did with the front yard, okay? Well, same type of situation, they could put in the backyard just fine, but their topography again prevented that, okay? We did, if I recall correctly, on both of them, go through, I don't wanna necessarily say negotiations, but, you know, we approved smaller or less than what they originally came for. You know, even at 78% of 1,400, I struggle with. Now, but I do go back to, you know, it's a different planning commission. What's the planning commission say? What is the vision of Groveland Township? And we get that from the planning commission. What we can go by is what supposedly was the vision when these ordinances were done 4 or 5 years ago. So, I'm torn. I honestly am torn.
And we'll still point the 32 square foot is, the portion facing the road in the area that everybody's gonna see on the private drive when they do drive down the private drive.
And that's the other thing that, you know, as I look at too, right, as you said, private drive, it's still gonna be hidden, you're still gonna have those things, so,
It's uphill from the road.
you know,
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying this is probably one of the hardest that I've sat through, and I've been doing this for a couple of years now, so.
And I mean, I could go slightly smaller than 1,400, I just can't go close to 900 or 1,000, why am I building a pole barn? You know, why am I living in Groveland at that point, you know, to an extent? But I could go down to 1,300 if that's what's gonna kinda get approved. Now, I'll be jumping up happy on something like that, no, still be upset, but life goes on and I still get to build a pole barn and put stuff in there, I just have to limit the amount of stuff that I can acquire to put in said pole barn, you know? And it's trying to get rid of blight in the area too, really trying to not have trash or other areas out there, so trying to improve the community.
Can I just add a comment?
Yes.
You know, listening to the comments, and I understand the square footage, and I understand like materials, and I understand all that, I'm still going back to the alternative. I wouldn't be talking about square footage or like materials if there's another alternative to the property that wasn't in the front yard, that would meet his square footage requirements. You said yourself, you could do it, but it would require all these things. I get that, I understand that, but I keep going back to the alternative. And that's where I'm struggling with it. I'm struggling with the size too, and just put the alternatives aside, I'm right with you on the size, I'm right with you with the square footage. I'm actually right with you on the like materials too, and I don't think that this meets that portion of the ordinance either, you know, so not to hang up on the size, not to hang up on the like materials. I'm going back that there's an alternative out there that's where I'm hung up at. I'm with you on all the other stuff, but that alternative is there, and I see it. I can't tell you how to do it, I can't tell you what it's gonna cost, I can't tell you, you know, all those different things, but that alternative's there.
And that's a house addition.
I don't know if it's a house addition, I didn't say that.
Where-
I said
okay, but where are you
there's
proposing?
alternatives
Okay.
to the area, and that area to meet his square footage requirements. I don't know if it's an addition, I don't know what the solution is, I just know that the alternative hasn't been fully
Okay, but you're the
explored.
landscape architect, I'm not.
I know.
So tell me where, I mean, I saw the property, tell me where you think
I
the placement should be. But that's.
I would love to be a consultant in this role to tell you how to do something, but
Well,
that's
if-
not my role here.
Well, no, because
My
that's your
role-
vision.
Yeah, and that's the township's vision too, is not to put a big barn in front of the house on the property. I also have issues with the setbacks for this barn too. That's not even addressed in the ordinance, because you are so close to an existing residence that is right to is that the west? there that you're putting this big pole barn on. I have a problem with that setback. Now, can I sit here as a BZA and say, you know, I want that pole barn 40 feet or 50 feet from the property line instead of 20 feet? Tell me what that does to you, where your location is. It puts it right in the middle of your driveway. So I don't have a solution. I don't feel I am, as part of this board, able to provide a solution. I just have those alternatives that are there, and that's my reasoning for why I would vote this down.
Understood, and thank you. Just to be clear, there's no variance needed for setbacks, correct? The proposal is.
No, there's not.
There's no variance for
No.
the setbacks.
All right,
Yeah, and that's what I said, the ordinance is silent to the setback, but I personally
well,
have a
not
problem with
entirely.
that.
It
And that's,
says
but that's
So
not
we
even
can,
under.
that's where we can say we need buffers.
Yeah. If we have that ability to say buffers, that might be a way to go, but I can tell you, any further from that property line is gonna put them in the middle of his driveway.
So,
Well,
I don't know, it's a solution to what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that alternative. I don't think it's been fully explored to minimize it and stuff, so.
Danielle?
I just have a question.
I think it's a long, my mom was right.
You know, I know Mike is, and this is good for me to know because I am their first contact as the zoning administrator. I go through the application with them, I let them know what they need to do, what they can and cannot have. As a board, how many alternatives? There's alternatives for everything. I mean, you want a bridge to the moon? Sure, we can get you a bridge to the moon. It just costs some money. You know, you want an alternative for putting it elsewhere? I'm sure there's tons of alternatives. What is your guys' length of alternatives?
Well,
I mean, how far are you gonna go to say, well,
I'm gonna
Danielle,
look at what was brought to me.
I get what you're saying. I think Mike and I are kind of hitting on the same thing. He uses the term alternative. I'm kind of looking at it as more of a concession. Like, I understand the essence of the proposal. I'm just asking, I'm struggling with the proportion of it. And I'm seeking a concession personally on size. I think I struggle with the size of the proposal.
well, Mike's looking at not even putting it in the front yard, that there's alternatives to putting it and going the size that he wants in the backyard. So
But
that's.
who are we to impose, right? And
Not the
with all
backyard.
due respect, it's this gentleman and his wife's request, it's their property, I'm sure if there were an alternative that they desired, they would bring that forward. What they want is what we have to pass judgment here.
so renovating the front of my house to put an existing garage door and tearing out all that asphalt, changing the whole.
Well, and I guess that's what I'm envisioning, but in my brain, that's not an outbuilding, that's not an accessory building at that point. But, okay,
Again, I
just-
can't get
yeah.
into the solutions.
Sure.
I am here to say that I don't think that the alternatives have been fully explored for the square footages that he would like. I'm not saying that he can't do a barn in the front yard. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying that I'm not willing to go and come to a concession of size in the front yard until those alternatives are proven to me otherwise. So I can't give the solution, I'm sorry, that's not my job here, but that's the thing I'm struggling with, period. Before I even get to size and what materials. And Jenny, if I'm off base, I'd be love.
So, I just have to say, I love sitting on this side.
And that being the chairman, huh?
And I feel your pain, you know, you guys have a really difficult job because you care about this community. And as people come in and they have dreams and desires for what they would like as within the community, you are looking for ways, well, okay, the ordinance says this, but maybe there's another way. And so you get into those discussions, and we all have done it over the years. And I'm just gonna sound like a broken record tonight, guys, and say, you gotta look at what your role is on the BZA. And you have compassion for your neighbors and citizens of this community, but you have a role on the BZA to enforce the ordinance, not make up a new one to help accommodate a situation that's before you to decide, but to understand without any ambiguity. And if there's ambiguity, then you have to address it. But if there's no ambiguity as to what the vision of the ordinance is, it is your job to enforce it. There may be, again, we say there's that odd time, there's an exception, and there's things that have to be demonstrated to you for why that exception should be granted. But your job is to enforce the ordinance. So,
Right here, I've got 5 rules, so I want somebody to tell me which one's not being fulfilled, please.
I think we've, you know, if I may suggest that if the board, I think we've discussed a lot tonight. I think we discussed a lot the last meeting. And I think if this board wants to, I think we can make a motion, someone can make a motion to, what the board wants. And we have the ability as a board member to say no.
Right.
If we don't agree with the motion, we have that, and I'm prepared to say no too. But I'm only one person on this board. So if that's the case and the desire of this board to move forward with some type of concession, you know where I stand. And I told you I'm prepared to make the motion, but I'm willing to also entertain other motions that may or may not go along. So, and that's kind of my job here on the board too as well. So with that, I mean, throw it out there. If anybody wants to make a motion, I don't think we're at a point for the square footage of 13, 14, 900, 800, you know, like materials, not like materials, metal side, box metal
I
side.
think we've got that covered, but again, this has been my rubric, this was what was given to me, and we were told our job is to say no, but I'm looking at this and it's fitting the criteria, that is my rubric. So yes, I'm prepared to make a motion that we grant the variance. The location is not an issue. I will say the size of 1,300 square feet, and like materials.
Are you gonna say like materials to what's currently there or to his house?
He's got a brick house. So I'm going to say like materials to what's currently there, to the other
principal
existing
building.
outbuilding.
Oh, to the existing outbuilding?
He's not gonna brick, I don't think he's going to, yeah, no, I think that's unreasonable, the brick, for an outbuilding. So like materials to, as far as colors, right? You said asphalt your roof, and then you have your metal on the other building, correct?
Yes.
Which is standard for an outbuilding.
So that's a motion?
It's a motion.
I will second the motion. Shall we vote?
Roll call?
Mike Donlin,
No.
Judy Schulte,
Yes.
Gina Musarelli,
Yes.
Chris Jonassy,
No.
Jeff Penzine.
Yes.
Majority rules.
Okay.
That's why we have boards.
So the variance request of Oak PH 23-0008 for 995 Hollyview Lane, parcel ID number G-02-18-400-015 is approved.
As amended.
Correct, as amended, as stated and amended. So that will take us back to tonight's agenda.
I would just like to say thank you, and that I may get kind of heated and passionate, but this is our forever home. And this is a community that we picked to be in it, and I'm very, very passionate about our property, and our house, and our neighbors in our area, so and she grew up in, yes, so.
And I appreciate that, being here since I was 6 years old, in the house that I grew up in. So that, I appreciate that passion, and that, you know, that's why we're here with the boards and stuff, and to talk through this stuff and to go and to vote. So I appreciate that passion.
Yeah, I don't wanna
And
make
it's
that
not-
statement, it's not personal, it's just.
I just wanna say it's not
For everyone.
personal, the way we vote, okay? It's not personal, it has not, I mean, it goes back to my training as a BZA member and what I was trained to do, okay? And so because if it was a personal vote, I would say whatever. Okay, so it's not, I don't want you to think that it was personal. It was based on my training, what I've been taught.
Go get those ducks.
So, and thank you, Chris. Everyone, thank you very much. That was not easy, I will say. So at this point, should we move to open the public hearing?
Yes, you guys do
I'll
that.
make a motion to open the public hearing.
And I'll second.
So we should
I
state.
think they're scared.
A little nervous.
This is meeting 2 as well, our other one lasted 2 hours, so.
So, just for clarification, this would be a motion to open the public hearing for variance request number PH 23-0010. Applicants Nicholas and Audrey Perriars, they're the owners of 954 North Jocelyn Road, parcel ID number G-02-02-300-019. We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor of moving to public hearing?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Who motioned and who seconded, sorry?
Chris motioned, I seconded.
Well, everybody's.
Thank you.
First motion.
Okay, so we're.
I'm sorry, Judy, it was over.
We're now in public hearing for the variance request on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Perry, our board here, correct? You folks had the benefit of seeing the process in action. Yours is a similar, almost an identical, variance, just on the criteria, location, size, and like materials, correct?
Oh, Judy, this is a corner lot. Does this mean they have 2 front yards?
Yes.
Yes.
So technically.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, so if I'm reading this correctly, if you don't mind, the pole barn is the proposed barn that you're looking at, so that would be in the front yard, but it's going toward the Groveland Road, is that?
That's correct.
So, I looked through the materials, I truly did, and personally, they were confusing, because I wasn't able to glean, there were some materials in here that I had no idea, clue, or speculation as to why they were included. And for example, I'll cite the letter from Oakland County Health to Betty Cataret. I have no, what is her stake in the outcome of this request?
We bought the land from her.
Yeah.
She was the previous landowner, we bought the land from her.
Okay, so what is the relevance of Betty Cataret's interest in your request?
That was.
This is to show that they needed to do an engineered septic.
Yeah,
That's
this
the
is
way I
just,
said it.
Yeah.
this is just this doesn't pertain to us.
Yeah.
Almost every septic.
Almost
request is
everything, yeah,
engineered now.
almost everything in here doesn't pertain to us, because it's all about the septic and the well, and so
Right,
we don't need to worry about it.
Right.
thank you. So I'm glad I spent a lot of time trying to figure out.
So Betty lives across the street from me, I went across the street and said, okay, what's up?
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, is it okay just to ask them to speak to the application?
Mhm.
Yep.
So the floor is yours.
You wanna go, you want me? So, we're originally from this area, we moved here, thinking it would be a great place to try to, as people say, a forever home. I've lived in the area probably 20 years. I'm originally from a small little town called Howard Beach, 1,500 people, so it's kind of reminded me there. Had the same process to do an outbuilding with variance, so I kind of figured it was same process, if you will. When we bought our land, and we looked at it, and we talked to our builder, we knew that it was gonna be hard to do what we wanted to do, just because of the, as you guys stated, the topography of the land, and where we wanted to place things was gonna be very difficult. And after speaking with multiple people, this was our best scenario as to where things laid out, obviously, because the big thing is the drain. Addison drain runs right through the front of our property. So,
The what drain?
Addison drain.
Addison drain runs right through the front of our property.
Is that a regulated drain?
There is
Yeah.
one class 4 or chapter 4 drain in the township of Addison, but I think it actually starts on the end of Place Pond.
It comes down through,
It goes towards Cataracts property.
That's why that paperwork is in there, cause it shows the drain on this.
So, and I appreciate the paperwork was provided, and thank you. What are you requesting? Are you asking for a detached accessory building?
Yeah.
yes, I guess. if
For
that's-
what purpose?
So, we have,
I was gonna say, purpose doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, no.
Well, there's no, okay.
The only, we don't get into why they want it. We just need to look at, okay, the size, they're asking for size and location.
They're building a house and a pole barn, it's not
At the
just.
same time.
Yes,
Right,
at
and
the
when you
same
go
time.
and- When you go and look at the property, I needed clarification, so, I wondered if that one drive grass area with the road across it is also access to your property on Groveland? I mean,
No.
it's right on the corner, it's just over,
That's right.
that's
That's
still
our
within
neighbors.
buddies?
Yeah.
There's 2 lots between the last house there in the corner. They
Alright.
bought the one on the corner, the one with the rope on Groveland.
Yeah,
I don't know if it still does, it used to belong to Ben, but.
okay.
they sold,
That's
they sold,
right,
yeah,
no,
they
no,
sold
no,
it, there's
okay.
2 times, yeah, that's nothing to do with
Because
us.
you saying two front yards kind of threw me.
No,
It's
That
it's a
had-
corner
It's a
lot.
corner
I get it, it's a
lot
corner
because
lot, right.
their house is gonna face Josman, but because they're on the corner with Groveland, they technically have 2 front yards.
Okay, and then looking at where you have everything staked off, my biggest question was, is the placement of the pole barn in this drawing and where you have it on staked off, because you don't wanna cut any more trees down? Or why is the placement there? Tell me why you're putting the pole barn, or that pole barn where you want it.
Well, the drain sets back off of Groveland a little ways. There's a culvert that the county came in and dug up the road and put a new culvert in, trenched everything, so that water would start flowing through there better. So it cuts back into our property a little ways, and then our property is very low, which is also why we had to get an engineered septic field, and we have to bring a lot of fill dirt and a lot of sand in order to even build a house there. Where we're putting the house is actually the highest part of the property, and where we're putting the barn is the second highest part of the property.
What's the size of the house you're putting in?
1,404 square foot, 1,408,
And what size barn are you looking for?
40 by 60, 24.
So in your case, the detached accessory building would exceed the size of the main dwelling? And we are talking about, to my fellow board members, 54-616, correct? Right?
What size is the property?
5 acres.
5 acres.
That's pretty critical. Your application says 4.28. Is it less than 5, meaning 4.28, or is it 5?
We were told it's 4.9.
The descriptions on almost all the parcels on public roads in Groveland Township have one description that shows up on the deed, and mine says it's 1, but on my tax assessment, it says 6.95.
Is that the road right away?
Because they take the road right away out of it. If they're on the opposite side of Groveland from me, kind of kitty corner, I'm assuming the 4.8 you got probably would be 5 if you had it to the middle of the road, which is probably what your deed says.
Yep.
Okay,
30.
and it if I had to guess, it's probably to the middle of the road on Jocelyn also.
So the four.
It's that way on all,
No.
not every, Dixie's a little different, but almost every parcel of the township.
So are we in subsection 4, or are we in subsection 3? It doesn't matter.
Well, it's the difference between 3,200 square foot accessory building and 4,000 square foot
So
accessory.
it matters.
So when you ask, what's the size of the accessory building again?
24.
So in both cases, if this was a rear yard or the accessory building would be in the rear yard, this would be a allowable square foot. Okay, that's,
But at best, it's a side yard,
It's technically a front yard,
it's still technically,
because they have 2 front yards.
and that's by ordinance definition.
okay. Right.
So
And we can't go.
So it's in the
on-
front yard on Groveland Road.
technically, by ordinance definition, with the 2 front yards, majority of their property where the house is located is front yard. And with the lowlands and stuff like that, like the applicant said, or Mr. and Mrs., I'm sorry, pronounce your last name.
Period.
Period. I'm gonna have to say that 3 times. I'm gonna say that right now. Period. Okay. With the locations, the alternate locations that you've explored because of septic field and things like that around the property, you know, that's where the house and the septic fields, the barns, utilities, all that stuff is being located. The thing on this particular case is that, and I see this as a hardship by the ordinance because we define the front yards as the majority of their property right now. You know, that's where it is. They are building on the only part of the building, the property they can build on. And that's where all these have happened. So, you know, plus I can't read the drawing, but it said it was 180 some feet from the Groveland Road, right? Is that what I read on there?
Yes.
It's 180 feet to the location that they currently have. Looking at the hardship that the ordinance definition for front yards is saying on this 5 acre piece with a barn that meets the square footage of an accessory building, I would be, and I'm gonna just go out and say it, I would be in favor of granting this variance so long as the buffer, and I'm not sure where this drain goat comes into play, and I got some questions on that one, but so long as the buffer remains in place. And the like materials, I think that the like materials would need to be like materials for the home.
There.
They
There
are.
will be.
So you're not asking for a variance on the like materials then?
No.
No.
Okay, so that's a moot point altogether. It becomes square footage is what we have on it. So,
Can I ask, do you think that's something else that needs to be looked at then, as far as can we use driveway access if it's a corner lot, to which road? Or do we not?
I believe
It's
Do
2 front
this.
yards.
Yeah.
there's 2 front yards and it's by definition of the ordinance. The hardship is presented by the ordinance because of that definition. So therefore, you know, I think in this particular case, given the circumstances that you're already gonna meet the like materials and you're 180 feet off of the Groveland Road, which is that front yard, and that green belt is heavily buffered there.
380.
380 feet off the
Oh,
road.
sorry, 380.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it 300?
It's 380
Yeah,
off the road.
380
Yeah,
feet.
I couldn't read that dimension, so,
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah,
Mike,
yeah.
380.
my packet didn't have anything in there. Where is this drain on the property? I'd like to know where the regulated drain is in particular. Point that out.
So the
This-
drain
Yeah,
runs.
it comes down this way and goes right, that's why this lower area, this
So
is the drain. The drain runs all the way through.
Right through here.
Yes, this is the drain.
Okay, so it runs along Groveland Road, where she's describing it for the record. It's running along Groveland Road at the bottom, at the southern location of the property. So, okay, that answers the question. What is going on in the, what would be the northeast corner of your lot and stuff, this corner here? What is up in, it looks like it's low?
It is
It's
low.
low.
It's actually 7 feet lower than where the current barn location is now. So there's, based on our builder, he's like, you're gonna have to bring in like $50,000-$60,000 worth of fill just to get that up, to put a barn in.
Can I ask a question? If there's a location for the house and for the barn, if they flip-flopped them, barn would be in the side or backyard, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So couldn't you put the house where the barn's scheduled to be and the barn where the
Septic
house is
field.
scheduled to be?
It's where the septic.
It's where the septic field birthed.
Septic fields.
They have a reserve and they have
It's
a,
not too far. Yeah,
How
it's-
far is the septic field from the house?
it's right, if you take a look here, the septic field that's there is the one they're gonna be building is in front of it.
And
then
that's
this is the
only
reserve
place
field?
that parks on that
And
parcel?
and if,
Hmm.
well,
Yeah.
if they're both front yards, then it's still the same thing.
No, it isn't.
Well, he's
No.
talking over here.
You
Side.
flipped the
Yeah.
house and the
Okay.
barn, the house would be closer to the Groveland side, the barn would be north of it in the side yard.
Because now they're in the side or backyard and it's not
But I
front
think
yard.
there's the lowland according to this.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think this is all low.
But the house is already.
So it would prevent the flooding.
So
So the
what-
flipping would be, I'm suggesting, or asking, flipping the barn to right where the house is.
Yeah. Oh,
Because
Is
they've
that-
already got it staked and dug there, I know. And then putting the house where the barn would be,
Okay.
and then it wouldn't need a variance at all.
have you considered that with your builder?
Yes, and when we had the first perk done, they perked where the barn is and said we do not recommend putting a septic field here. So then we had to have another perk done, and the second perk said, this is the best place to put your septic field.
But regardless of septic fields, they're located already. We know they're on the plan. What we're talking about is the barn being where the house is located and the house being where the barn's located. Did you explore that opportunity?
Yeah, that's,
But then wouldn't the house be too far from the septic?
Well,
Not necessarily. I mean, they, depending on what they have, I
Well, if it's
mean,
running underneath, then you're running underneath driveways and everything else.
yeah, that's true.
If you really flipped them, then your barn would be in front of the house.
your barn is still in front. If you're
Yeah.
flipping them, if you still, Jasmine is a front and Groveland is a front, you're still gonna have part of that barn in front of the house if you flip them.
Can I see the drawing?
Yes.
No, I think you can do it with flipping them, but, I mean, just in the pure paper sense of the word. I'm asking if you explored that opportunity with the builder. You said, yes, you have. And I'm not, you're right about running the septic field from where the barn's located. You gotta run your lines from where, if that house is located where the barn is, you'd have to run your lines to that first field underneath your driveways.
Your
Stuff.
feeder line would be,
Yeah,
if that's there.
yeah, your leader line would be, but the barn would be
My
in
son-
side or rear yard.
The
of
barn
the-
side.
Yeah. Do you understand what we're talking about, Gina? You keep,
Yes.
okay.
And where are they telling you the Addison drain is?
it's right, that's what this is. That's why this is lowest, cause all this water from the drain sits right.
I didn't see water,
Sorry.
but I could believe in the summer or in the spring that might be what Addison drain, I think, technically starts on 2 parcels down on Vandepun's old place, okay? But all of there's a couple hundred acres around it that technically sheds into, like my 7 acres is high on the south end, runs down towards Groveland Road, goes through a culvert, and then this property is lower than Groveland Road, as is everything pretty much, I think, on that whole south side of the road, and runs in from that pond into the drain, through Cataract's property, over to the next street.
So,
The map I have actually shows technically it started, but I believe that this probably, they must have cleared out a culvert under here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
County came in.
the drain
Yeah.
corner probably.
Yeah. There's a public record of that too, I think in 2006 they put that drain in.
I think I need clarification, and I'm gonna out my ignorance right now, but we are again talking about a detached accessory building owing to a hardship from physical characteristics of the land, which puts us back in the ordinance where we were with Mr. and Mrs. Cook, correct?
And a hardship for the ordinance itself because of the 2 frontages.
And I guess that's where what's proposed has a frontage to Jocelyn Road.
And Groveland.
So that's
They
really
have
what,
2 front
that's really
yards.
what the problem is
But
it's
that-
got 2 fronts.
But I'm not understanding that because
The-
they have plans to build a
doesn't-
house,
yes.
correct? So
It doesn't matter, their property, because
What ordinance is that?
there's here,
It's in the.
This is what you're saying,
It's
it's
like
like
if you have a
Correct, just
corner lot,
based
there's
upon the-
two
it doesn't matter.
Okay,
Because it's a corner lot, we went through this a number of years ago, because it's a corner lot, they have 2 front yards. It's front to Josman and it's front to Groveland. Even though based on their drawing, it looks like it's a side yard, it's still considered a front yard. So all of this is considered front yard.
Yep.
All of this is considered front yard.
okay,
So
That's why they need a variance.
basically, the only backyard they have is gonna be right in this area. The rest of it's all front.
so that gets us back to the requirements imposed by the ordinance. What is the element, if you will, that we're varying? Is it size?
Yes, because in the front yard, they can only do 50%.
Okay,
So they could only do a 700 square foot barn. Now, if it was in the backyard, they could do up to 3,200.
and the barn in this case is proposed to be 2,400.
Yes.
The house is 14.
So I guess I'm struggling with,
It looks so close.
what do you mean it looks so?
It does, it looks
I mean-
so close, here, if you're looking corner to corner, it's like, why can't, I mean, the only, again, I think Mike was right, the hardship is to the 2 front yards. Because if you're looking at it from where their house is, where it lines up, it technically could be not in the front yard,
But it would be in the front.
but it's in the front yard because of Groveland.
But that's
So-
on every corner lot.
It's what?
So
Every
That's
corner,
every
every
Right,
corner lot in the
again,
township.
so then is that, so does the ordinance create the hardship?
Yeah, you,
No.
I don't think you could say an ordinance creates a
Creates-
hardship.
the
Because
ordinance
if you do
doesn't
that,
create
you
the
could
Creates the
concoct a
reason-
story for
Sorry,
everything
yeah,
ever happened.
You're right, okay, creates a reason for potentially. But yeah, I mean, just, doesn't it?
It's the front yard,
Yeah,
it's a
it's the front
corner
yard.
lot, and they're asking for a variance of the square footage, and they're matching the building with like materials. And I'm saying, because it's a front yard, corner lot, the barn's 380 linear feet from the Groveland Road front yard, that I
Which
would
isn't the
be,
front yard.
I would not be opposed to this variance, provided that that green belt is continuously maintained. They can't put another accessory building in there. They, you know, if they wanna clear the lots and stuff, I'm saying that because it's 380. That's the unique thing to this ordinance, is that it is a corner lot. And by technically, we're 54/1/7, whatever, you know, that's what the variance is for. So.
And I agree with you 100%.
How do you
with
make
the
that happen?
exception, it's doing the same thing again.
Just doing what's the same.
It's making the exception to a variance because it's the front yard. Oh, but there's 380 feet.
But these are the
Yeah.
esoteric
Right,
considerations
right,
we
but,
spoke about.
and that's what I'm saying, it's the
Right.
same thing, different circumstances,
That's
but,
why I struggle with precedent for these cases, as I said earlier,
Yeah.
because
They are
every
individual.
situation is
Yeah.
different.
How do you control it? What if they sell it and then somebody, do you put it in an easement or something in the deed? How do you control that wording?
That's correct. Technically, we cannot because the power lines are on Groveland Road, 50 feet. The first 50 feet of that is owned by consumers or DTE. So we asked, and we were not allowed to put an easement off of Groveland Road. We had to put the easement on Johnson.
Oh, really? They wouldn't give you a
Yes,
driveway?
they would not give us a driveway.
I don't think they owned it, they just.
Well, they
They-
It's
maintain
their
it.
They have the
They
easement.
maintain it. and
It's an
they-
easement.
In fact, the gas line's under there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they did not
Yes,
allow
lights
us.
on the north, oh, yeah, yes, it is on the north side.
So, Brother Donlin, if you treat Jocelyn Road as the front of the home, would you still advocate approval?
It's behind, that's actually,
Yeah.
if that was a lot,
they wouldn't need.
if that was a lot that wasn't on a corner,
Yeah.
they wouldn't need the variance. Because their
That's right.
square footage
Right, they wouldn't need.
meets the accessory, it's under
Yeah.
the accessory square footage for, as the ordinance is written. It's
Mm-hmm.
5 acre lot, 4,000 square feet, they're asking for 2,400 square feet. So that barn wouldn't meet that ordinance if it was
Yeah.
not a corner lot.
Wait, what was the square footage of the house?
1408.
1408.
But that wouldn't matter, cause it's behind the house. If they didn't have the Groveland front yard, it would be behind the house.
Yeah, it'd be.
So they don't need the variance.
They wouldn't need
But
the
they
variance.
do.
But they do have the growth in front yard.
That's how it was.
Yeah, but they do, they require the variance for the square footage because it's in the front yard of Groveland Road.
I understand
Sorry, I wasn't trying to.
If I might comment, this is the precarious slope you start when you don't adhere to what the previous chair told you they spent months on doing when they revised the ordinance, because the original ordinance was, you get nothing.
Correct, and you know, when you look at the ordinance itself, it doesn't speak to any of the setbacks. It doesn't speak to green belts or requirements. It doesn't speak to all of that. It just strictly speaks to things, the square footage and like materials, right? And that's, if you look purely at that, right now, as we stand here today, looking at this lot, that would be grounds for denial. So, the other option is, to me, and this is where I go back to my tabling thing, is in circumstances with like these, is there considerations for these things that would be allowed? I don't have that.
That's our job.
Then,
Because even though every corner lot technically has 2 front yards,
right,
it is not every property in Groveland Township is on a corner. So this is where the variance, in my understanding, where the variances come to us. This is not a situation, because it's the 2 front yards, that we see for every variance that we have.
and if that's the case, and we have the ability to say that because it's 380 feet off of Groveland Road, and we say that you know, we will allow this because of that distance, that's the variance that we would grant, right? If we were to approve it as a board. It's not 50 feet off the road. I would not be in favor of that 50 feet off the road, a 2,400 square foot barn. I mean,
I understand what you're saying, in essence, if the buffer's left there, because it's all pretty dense when I look at it.
We're never gonna cut the woods down.
If it stays there,
It's
to
every-
everyone else in the world driving by, it will look like a house on Jocelyn Road.
Correct.
That's
And it might look like a house on Jocelyn Road to people that don't know our zoning with an empty lot next to it, when it's really the buffer that he would
And
have.
that's because from Jocelyn Road, this is not a front set accessory. building.
Yeah, if you look at, because I drove by, I walked over there and I drove by it and I saw where the house is staked and I thought, it's actually closer to Debbie Harding to your north,
Okay.
okay? House than it is to mine. And if, I guess I would say, I'm not saying this gets approved because I understand the precarious slope you're setting up here, that you're going to end up having, I think, everybody that wants a front barn for whatever reason and whatever size, coming in and asking it. You should be saying, if you actually think that's wrong, go back to the planning commission and have them debate it again. But that takes 4 or 5 months, and then another, I think, 90 days to get the ordinance changed. And I can tell you, that was not done lightly. But that doesn't mean it can't be changed, it doesn't mean you don't have the right to ask them, but the final decision for it actually goes to the township board. So, I think you made some comment about retilling turned earth or something.
Plowed soil.
Soil, okay. So, I mean, that's really the sequence of events. That takes time, and you don't know the outcome of that yet. And I'm just saying, this tonight is a perfect example, I think, of starting a very precarious, slippery slope that will make it hard for you to come up and say, well, I don't care if they make the same material, I don't care how big they make it, and I really don't care where they stick it. That was not what they were doing. They spent months looking at every variance request that came in and trying to figure what would fit and what was a reasonable accommodation. And so if you consider from the original perspective of the ordinances that have been here since the 70s, the rule was nothing goes in the front yard, period. It goes in the back or side yards. They made a huge concession by allowing them to have anything in the front, and the purpose for that was to say, limit it to 50% of the size of the building so it never looks like it's over dominating the rest of it. And I'm not trying to pick at you because I looked at your property the other day for the first time. I'm just saying, that's the issue that needs to be resolved. And in this case here, I could see where you might be saying, you know, well, with a big buffer there, Bob's not even gonna see it. The only reason I knew they were working there, I heard the excavator show up. Okay, so I understand that, but I'm saying, these are the things that set up precarious slopes going forward. I don't know if you approve both of these, I don't know how you're gonna turn them. What would you use for a reason we didn't do it the next time? And then you are back to having people with the problems we had that had huge barns in the front yard, and you can guess where most of the junk shows up. Because it's not necessarily the person that built it, but it's 3 owners later that did it.
Duly noted.
Well, I'm telling you, and you have to go to the board for changes on this.
I understand, and I think I'll just resort back to the application rises or falls on its own merits.
Correct.
And the ordinance, in my opinion, is sufficient to allow this board to do its job. To preserve the intention of the ordinance while at the same time accounting, considering and furthering the property owner's property rights, basically. So, the click in the room was my brain finally figuring out why you do not need to worry about a variance if Jasmine Road is
Solely.
the front
Solely
yard.
the front.
So, I'm good. If that matters. So, any other questions, for Mr. and Mrs. Perrier? Chris? But should we close public hearing?
Make a motion, we close public hearing.
Second.
Do I need to cite the property, parcel ID and all of that? Okay. So, this would be a motion as seconded to close the public hearing for applicant number PH 23-0010 by Nicholas and Audrey Perriard at 954 North Jocelyn Road, parcel ID number G-02-02-300-019. Those in favor of closing public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, there being none, we're out of public hearing, and I guess at this time, we could entertain a motion.
I think just afford the opportunity to the applicant, you know, if they're interested in waiting for the planning commission or any of those things, they have the opportunity at this point to table the variance until such time that does happen. And I think that's not a board motion, but that's a request from the applicant themselves, and I think I'm just letting you know that you have that opportunity. So,
And thank you, Mike. I would add to that, that as chair of the planning commission, this is going to be taken up on our agenda for the next scheduled meeting in October. Just to-
But it'll be months
But
before
it's
it
still
gets,
months before.
before it
Still
gets
months
approved,
ahead.
so you would be able to build your house.
I'm sorry, but we're running out of time.
why couldn't they build their house? I mean, they were talking.
I just
about-
said they could build their house,
Oh,
but
they
you
could
wouldn't,
build their
yeah,
house,
they
okay.
wouldn't be able to
I
build the
thought you
pole
said you
barn
couldn't, okay.
in that location. Or you can take your chances and vote upon it now.
We'll just vote upon it now. We're running out of time. The bank's gonna say they want their money.
Pardon me?
It's our loan's only good for so many days.
Fair enough.
Well, for the lack of, I'll make a motion to approve this variance, as I stated before, to allow the square footage of barn because, in the front yard with that 380 linear feet from Groveland Road, which is the front yard that this barn's proposed to be in, as part of the variance. I would give that a variance. I'll make that motion. It's a very sloppy motion, but I make it.
You're saying that the 380-foot distance needs to be maintained as a wood?
Needs to be maintained,
And still
yeah.
like materials.
And still like materials and stuff like that, so then the applicant said that, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Perrier, yes.
You said it 3 times.
I know, it's in five. Yeah, they already said that they would do the like material, so I make that motion.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? We'll do a roll call vote on this, Daniel?
Yeah. Judy Schulte,
Yes.
Gina Musarelli,
Yes.
Chris Jonassy,
No.
Jeff Penzine,
Yes.
Mike Donlin.
Yes.
Majority.
Okay, so the motion for the, for variance request by Mr. and Mrs. Perrier is approved.
Thank you.
All right, back to tonight's agenda. I'm not sure there is anything else. Actually, there is not, so any other comments, questions, concerns from the board or those here tonight? No?
When is the planning commission meeting again?
24th.
I'd like to put that on my Radar.
Twenty-fourth,
The 24th?
yes, that's the fourth Tuesday.
I'll be around, thank you.
Yes, your attendance would be appreciated.